Hi, I am Padma Malikarjunan. I am an enterprise support manager at AWS, and I am based out of Austin, Texas. Welcome to AWS Knowledge Center Live, where we share best practices and troubleshooting tips from AWS Support. Joining me today is EP Komarla and Michael Beck. Can you give us a quick introduction, EP and Michael?
Sure. Thanks, Padma. I'm very happy to be here. I am EP Kumarla. I'm one of the senior technical account managers based out of Bay Area in California. I have been with AWS for last 4 years in this capacity. I work with a few very large enterprise customers based in Bay Area. So I have been working with them on a lot of practices around tagging. Many of them have actually benefited very significantly by using tagging practices and adapting some of the concepts that we are going to talk about today.
And I'm Michael, and I'm an enterprise support manager for AWS. I've been here for last couple of years. Originally started out as a TAM. Now I have the opportunity to be able to lead a team in the Bay Area, San Francisco, California.
Thank you, EP and Michael. Today, we're going to be talking about tagging your AWS resources and the benefits of tagging, such as visualizing your costs based on those tags. Before we get into the details, a quick note to our attendees online. Feel free to use the chat window on the right-hand side of your screen to share your thoughts with us and ask your questions throughout the episode. We look forward to hearing from you. Michael, can you walk us through what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, thank you, Padma. I personally am very excited about this topic because I've seen the power that a number of customers have been able to leverage through tagging their AWS resources. And I think it's really important. A lot of customers and people maybe don't think about tagging early enough as part of their cloud architecture, but it is definitely something that they should think about very early on. So here's just a few of the things that we're going to be going over. Of course, we're going to talk about what is a tag, helpful to know what it is that we're talking about. And then we're going to talk about use cases. If you've ever had the pleasure of working with a technical account manager or solutions architect, one of the first things that they're going to ask you is, so what's your use case? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about AWS generated cost allocation tags, or using AWS tags as part of your cost allocation. Talk about user-defined tags, as well as creating and managing tags and tagging best practices. Interspersed in here, EP is also going to have a number of demos that he's going to go through to give us a look at what this all is like in the AWS Management Console. So let's go ahead and dive right into what is a tag. A tag is metadata, which is assigned to resources by AWS or by customers if they're a customer created tag. And it consists of a key and a value. You might be familiar with key value pairs if you're used to in some types of development, working with data, key value pair data stores, basically the same thing. You have a key, a tag key, which says what it is, and then you have a number of values, obviously, which is the value. So we've got some examples up here of where you might use of types of common keys and values. Environment, right? You might have production and QA, test, dev, staging, anything like that. Deployment, perhaps like the deployment type. Is it a blue? Is it a green? Or whether or not you're using something like AWS CloudFormation. And then we also have cost centers. So this is good for looking at how you allocate your resources, who's using them. And EP will talk about that a little bit later on when we're talking about cost allocations, Cost Explorer. And then also say department. Again, this is a great way to be able to segment your resources within AWS and to be able to define and report based off of what department might be using those resources. So here I'm going to just run through what the common use cases for tagging are overall. And I'll start with where most people do, which is the AWS Management Console. So by default, that is organized by service. However, if you use resource groups, it's a tool that allows customers to create a console view that organizes and consolidates the AWS services and resources across many services and regions. So instead of going from looking at, say, EC2 and looking at the instances in US East 1, then you could see all of not just your EC2 instances, but S3 buckets and so on. And we'll cover some more of that when we get into the demo. Cost allocation, which is another really good thing. Obviously, it's really important to know what you're spending on with AWS. And so it becomes, as you get larger and larger and your business grows, obviously knowing where your costs are is important as for a project or a line of business or an environment. For automation. So you can use tags to do a lot of different automation activities, such as stopping and starting, say, non-critical resources on evenings and weekends to save on your costs. You can also use a service like AWS Systems Manager to be able to patch systems at different times based on tags indicating, say, their environment or even their schedule. And then for operations support, tags can be used to integrate support for AWS resources into day-to-day operations, say IT service management processes such as incident management. You could have tags which indicate a system's priority, and then when a case comes in or a ticket comes in the triage process, you could use those to execute a specific workflow to send them to the right team in order to be able to respond faster. And then let me see, for access control, we've got AWS Identity and Access Management, and then you have policies which support tag-based conditions, enabling customers to constrain the access to their specific resources based off of the roles defined in the tags, such as, say, operations or finance, right? You could say that you want them to access certain resources, or you don't want them to access certain resources. And then lastly, security risk management, right? So security is our number one focus here at AWS, and it is usually the top focus of customers as well. And so what this allows you to do is you could tag, say, different Amazon EC2 instances based off of the sensitivity of the data that they handle or the process that they do. And then this allows you to enable certain types of compliance checks to ensure that the proper controls are in place. So next, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to EP, talk more about AWS generated cost allocation tags.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. So let me go over some of the AWS generated tags. So there are two types of tags. Some of the tags are generated by AWS and some of the others are created by the users. So a couple of points to keep in mind about these AWS created tags. First is only the master account can activate these tags. So that is a very important uh, point to keep in mind. This activation either has to be done with a from the master account with a IAM user or as a IAM role. And this need to be activated in the IAM AWS billing and cost management console. And once you do that, it will be applicable to all the member accounts. That's an important point to keep in mind. Second point is, uh, any users cannot modify any of these AWS created tags. All the AWS created tags will have the prefix AWS colon, and these will not count towards the number that we have specified. The user created tags is limited to 50, but the AWS created tags do not count towards that number. That is something to keep in mind. Still, you can create 50 of them. And the created by tag is applied only to resources once they are activated. That is something to keep in mind. So if I activate these tags at say today, any resources that are created henceforth will have this tag, but not the resources which were there in the system prior to this point on. So something to keep in mind. So Padma, over to you. Do you have any questions or comments from the chat at this point?
Quickly checking the chat window. I do not see any questions. Please feel free to post questions over here. We have EP and Michael here, experts on this topic, who will answer questions for you throughout the episode. But I do have a question here. Interesting concept. Now, if I have an application where I want to apply, say, multiple values per key, or even tag the same resources with the same key twice, um, is it possible?
No, the tag keys have to be unique. Say, if I have a tag key called cost center, that has to be unique. So one thing to keep in mind, which Michael is going to talk about, the tags are case sensitive. If I have all lowercase cost center, and then let's say I have another tag key called cost center with a capital C, those two are considered two different ones. So that is something, but I can only have the same tag key once only. Does that answer your question?
That does. Okay, so case sensitivity as well as unique keys. Thank you for that. And also on the topic you were just talking about, are there additional steps that I need to take to ensure that the tags flow into the AWS billing and cost and usage report, or does it flow automatically?
Very good point. So yes, all the tags that we need to enable them in the from the billing perspective, you need to activate them in the billing console. That is what is I'm going to show it in a demo, which is coming up now. So only after we activate them, we can see them in the billing and cost management console, and also in the cost explorer.
Got it. Thank you, EP. And also to our audience online, I will be posting links relevant to the topics we are discussing throughout the show. So feel free to follow the links as well, and post your questions, and we will address them for you here. Over to you, EP and Michael.
Sure. So let me go to the, can we go to the next, I think next is the demo, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so let me show you a demo of how to enable these tags in the billing and cost management console. So this is the main screen for the cost management console. If you see here on the left hand side, you have the cost explorer, as well as on the billing, you have cost allocation tags. So what you need to do is to enable the tags prior to using them, as I mentioned just a moment ago. So this cost billing and cost management console is a very useful tool to look at your bills as well as your costs. So both to analyze your cost and also to visualize your costs. And you can slice and dice your numbers in a variety of ways. So however, before you using all the cost explorer and billing console, you have to have this prerequisite. So as I mentioned, here is this AWS created by tag. and this tag need to be activated. So on the right hand side, you will see, is it active or not? So you need to activate it. For the sake of this demo, I have activated these tags prior to this recording. So if you see the other tags, these are all the user created tags. These include name, owner, cost center, and also environment. I have activated these as well. Couple of points to remember. This activation could take as much as 24 hours once you activate these tags. For this data to flow into the Cost Explorer and Billing Console, it can take up to 24 hours. So that is something to keep in mind. And the second point to reiterate, this has to be done by the from the master account. So this is the Cost Explorer demo. This is the landing page. In the Cost Explorer, you have a set of options to visualize your costs on a periodic basis. Say here is the cost numbers, how they are looking for over the last 6 months on a monthly basis across all the different services. And on the right hand side, you will see a set of filters. So for based on the service, on your linked accounts, AWS region, and then you have different cost categories, and also on the tags. So for this demo, let's go and adjust our time period to start with. So right now we have showing it as February 1st to July 31st. Let's make this change to include some of the days in August as well. So now I have included the first 19 days of August. And here are the different services and the corresponding costs. So let me narrow down to only one of the service which is of interest to us, which is EC2. So here I am showing that the Cost Explorer, you can filter your cost for different regions. So here you can select US East, Virginia, as well as US West, Oregon. And when you select it appropriately, the regions appear. And correspondingly, you can also use the different tags as well as your services as well. So here is how you use the tags. When I select the tag, and then the tag key shows here, and the corresponding values, what I'm interested, I can select. So when I select it and apply these filters, so this is the key value. So what you see is these are the costs across these two regions, US East and US West, Oregon. These are the costs for one for EC2 instances, and then this is for the EC2 other. So that's how you can filter your costs using the tags you have allocated to your various resources. And then you can also use a tag category to organize your resources based on tags. But we are not going to talk about the cost category in this demo. We are focusing primarily on the various tag options. So here is another report for a tag called auto delete. So when I select this particular tag, so here are the resources which match this particular tag. So likewise, you can filter on cost center for your different environment, or for your based on the type of deployment, whether it is a containerized or for EC2, likewise. So for various use cases, you can filter accordingly.
All right, thanks, EP. I appreciate that demo on using tags in Cost Explorer. So the next thing we're going to get into here is talking about user-defined tags. And so there's one question talking a little bit about from the Griever for the 500 tags, including AWS tags, or it's the same time. So I'll be sure to touch on that here, as you can see at the bottom of the slide. But I'll start off with talking about that the ability to define your own tag keys and values is very flexible. As you see, you've got 128 characters to do length for the key, 256 for the value. So you can stuff a lot of information and detail into there. The allowed characters are probably what you would expect. They're alphanumeric, along with spaces and a few other special characters. And this is true across pretty much any service or resource which supports AWS tagging. There are some differences. Not all services support tagging, and there is a list available for that, which Padma will drop into the chat, and you can go and look up there and see what tags you can use and how you can use them with the various services and resources. So this is where we'll touch on the number of tags limitation. So the maximum number of tags per resource for user-defined tags is 50. So on any one resource, you can supply 50 tags. The 500 tags is for the AWS generated cost allocation tags and for the billing. So the 50 of the user allocated tags, that's on a per resource basis. The 500 tags we were talking about earlier is for billing. As EP just showed, where you have to go in and activate your tags to be able to use them for your billing and cost management, that's the 500. So hopefully that answers that question. If not, feel free to follow up in the chat and I can circle back on it. And then the last thing I'm going to touch on is what EP had already mentioned, is that for each resource, each tag key must be unique. So if you have a tag key of environment, and let's say it's production, and then you try to apply another tag key of environment called test, then that second application is going to fail, or that second add of the same tag key is going to fail. What you would want to do is edit or modify that existing tag to change that environment tag value from production to, let's say, staging. So now we're going to talk about creating and managing tags. So obviously, the first one that you would think of is when you're creating your resource. So during creation, you can apply tags whether you're using the AWS Management Console, or if you're doing them, say, through the API or an SDK, or using a service such as AWS CloudFormation inside of your template. And when you create that stack, you can define the tags that you want to apply on those resources. For after creation, there's the tag editor, which is my personal favorite. I think it is extremely powerful. It allows you to do things such as create a query for different services and different resources across regions. So if you're really familiar with the AWS Management Console, typically you'll select a service, say EC2, and then you'll also select the region where you want to manage those instances. So using Tag Editor, it's really powerful because you can go in there and do it across regions. So I really like that feature. And of course, you have access to the AWS Resource Group API, and you also have the tagging functionality that is within each service's API to be able to apply and manage tags for those resources. So one thing, I'm just going to wrap up here on the AWS Resource Group tagging API. This is different from tagging resources. So the AWS Resource Group service and something where you can go in a groups, and as EP showed earlier, that's where you have the tag editor. And then later on, we'll be showing tag policies, which is inside of the same portion of the console. And that allows you to do things such as tag and untag, searching for the resources, and you can create compliance reports, both in the console and in the API. And the last thing I want to do a call out on is the fact that it operates against a single region. So console, like I mentioned earlier, it allows across regions. But when you're using the resource tagging API, that operates against a specific region. So Padma, do you have any questions out there?
Michael, thank you. And thanks for addressing some of the questions. Thank you for your questions. User Acor, SMX, as well as user the Griever. Thank you so much for your questions. If you have any follow-up, like Michael said, please post it on the chat window. We do have a follow-up question here from Vaibhav NJ. The question is, can you talk about tags in the context of a VPC? And are these cost tags available per account, per VPC? So I did post a link and a little bit of information around tagging your VPC resources. You can tag VPC resources. You can also tag them on create. These applies to your resources like VPC, subnets, network interfaces. And there is a lot more information in the link that I provided if you follow onto the documentation page. Anything else you want to add to that, Michael or EP?
So, Michael, you want to go or?
No, go for it, EP.
Sure. So, yeah, very good question, Padma. So, VPC can include multiple entities like subnets, NAT gateway, internet gateway, and bastion host. So you can have each of these entities in themselves can have tags. And the VPC itself can also have tags. That could be the VPC endpoints, VPC customer gateway. All of them can have their own tags as well. So that way, you can have a very fine grain tagging policy for all your resources.
Got it. Thank you so much for that, EP. Any additional questions? Please continue posting your questions on the chat window, and I'll also keep sharing links as we continue the conversation. So back over to you, Michael and EP.
Sure. So let me walk through the demo now. This is the tag editor, which Michael talked about. Tag editor is a very useful tool. One of the common questions I get from our customers is, hey, I get a lot of resources across multiple accounts in multiple regions. How do I make any kind of changes? Even how do I see what tags I have on these resources? So the tag editor is a very useful tool for this. So how do you access it? From the main console, you need to go to the resource groups. When you come to resource groups, one of the tool is tag editor. The tag editor is a global service. You can select different regions, different AWS regions, and also it has an option to select the kind of AWS resources which I'm interested in. So all the resources, majority of the resources are covered. There are few which are not covered. But in this case, in this demo, I'm choosing EC2 instance. And the tag key I'm interested is called environment. And the value I'm interested is production. So basically, I want to search for all the resources which have this tag key environment as production, my production instances in US East 1 region. And when I search on this, uh, here you go. So I got 6 instances listed out as part of this search. So now I can make global changes to these tags. Uh, so I can go and create tags for all these instances in one single operation. So here I'm adding another tag. So let me add another tag called new tag, add it, and the value I'm going to give it as new tag value, and I'm going to apply these changes. So here is the changes that are being added here. One thing to remember when we say apply these changes, it could take a moment, especially if I am doing this operation across resources across multiple regions. It could take some time. So before you switch to a different screen, make sure that this operation successfully completes. Otherwise, this operation may not be complete on all the resources. So which is something to keep in mind when you are making these edits. So here I'm going back to the same selection. So let me go back to one of the instances. So this is my EC2 instance screen. And here is the, when I look at the tags, I see that new tag which has been added, it is called new tag added, and the corresponding value is showing up. So that means my edits are successful. So I can go back and do the same operation. So now I can go and delete all these tag which I have added just now. So I'm deleting this operation in all the 7 instances. So very simple, very easy to manage, and so this way you can look at all your resources in one single console. Second, I'm going to show is the tag policies, which we will come to in the next demo. I will defer that for a couple of minutes. And the other feature I would like to talk about is create a resource group. Resource groups can be either tag based or it could be based on the CloudFormation stack based. When we select a tag based, what we are doing is we are building a logical grouping of all your resources based on their tag keys and their corresponding values. So as Michael said previously, tags can be used for variety of operations and also for automation. If you want to do any kind of operations uh, across a group of resources, you can use this resource groups as a logical grouping, and then you can do this operations in one single entity. So that way, you do not have to worry about individual elements. And then say I want to all the dev resources in US East 1 can be shut off at say 6 o'clock Eastern time, for instance, as an example. So here I am creating uh, a group called Finance Department Development Environment. So my group is created, and so when I see here, these are all the resources associated with that uh, resource group. So Padma, are there any questions in the chat at this point?
Yes, I do see a follow-up question, and I see, Michael, you have answered it as well. So the question was, are tags unique across VPC and accounts? And if you generated a report, how would that look like across the accounts? Thanks for answering that question. You can use the same tag key across accounts. So thank you for answering that, Michael. And I will also post another link follow up to your question. It talks about the tagging, because in case you're looking at the next step, VPCs and pairing VPCs across regions and accounts and so on. It talks about the best practices in there. So just as an additional information, I will post that on the chat window as well. So those were the questions on the chat window. Quick question for you, EP. If I have multiple AWS resources and I'm planning to migrate the workload, let's say I'm moving from a dev to prod or across regions, how do I modify these tags across many AWS resources at the same time?
Yeah, so that is one of the common use cases customers face with. The tag editor, which I showed, is a very useful way. So I can make a logical grouping of my resources as I'm moving the resources from, say, on-prem to, say, AWS. And then I can use the resource tag editor and the resource groups to make tags, edit the tags on all these resources in one single operation.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much. Back to you.
Thank you, Padma. So next thing I'm going to talk about is tagging best practices. This is another one of the things that came up in the chat. And so I'm going to talk about a few different things here. We've already touched on a number of times the fact that you want to use standardized policy for the case of the tag keys and the values. And I know we've mentioned this a few times, but it is really important, because if you say have environment with, which is all lowercase, and somebody else does environment with an uppercase E, those are two different tags. So when you go to run a report or manage the resources, they're not going to show up the same. Now, if you saw when EP was going through the demos, there is a suggestion box that will pop up. So when you go and click into it, it's going to provide you the list of already defined tag keys. And then when you pop over to values, it'll do the same. And then as you start typing, it will also auto filter that list for you. So that helps guide you and keep you on track and make sure that you're staying consistent. But if you're in a large organization and you have dozens or hundreds of tags because you're managing them across multiple dimensions. And for dimension, I'll just mention that this is something, for example, say security or cost center or project, right? That's a dimension of your tags. So it's just really important that you set out these standards from the beginning. As I mentioned at the top of the show, when I was talking about making tagging a part of your architecture discussion and decisions when you begin your cloud journey. One of the things that I like to say is to tag early, tag often. And that's because you really want to start tagging in the beginning. Now, you don't want to go overboard and just start dropping dozens and dozens of tags on every resource from day one, because that could get a little confusing. They can always grow with your organization and with your use cases. As I said, we love the term use cases. And so as you add these tags and as you develop these resources, your standards and your policies and your methodologies, they're going to change over time. So it's really important that you keep your tags up to date, both in terms of the keys and the values. It's something that's going to evolve. It's like a living document. So these are some of the general best practices. Since there was a question that specifically wanting me to dive a little bit deeper into this, I am going to spend a minute talking about some general concepts. So all of the AWS generated tags have that AWS colon on the front of them. And so one of the ones that EP talked about was created by. So once you start applying these tags and these AWS resources, you're going to have this AWS colon created hyphen by tag key, and then you're going to have the value. And from there, you can define all of the AWS generated tags because they've got that prefix on them, that AWS colon. So a good recommendation is to have all of your tags as part of your naming standard and convention is to perhaps start with your organization. And then that way you would know that those tags were user created and not AWS created. So you'd have my company colon environment, my company colon cost center or cost hyphen center. That's going to determine, whether or not you're using uppercase, lowercase, camel case, snake case, whatever you do. Everybody has their own idea as to what they prefer and how it works best for them. Use whatever is comfortable. That is entirely up to you and your organization. Just make sure you define one and that you stick with it and that you're consistent. So that's one of the kind of tips or hints that I would give you when talking about creating a strategy is using that organization colon, whatever it is you're trying to define.
Perfect.
So now we're going to go ahead and jump into EP. You've got a demo for us on tag policies.
Yes. A couple of points to add to what Michael said in the last point. Both AWS organizations, which we are going to show for creating tag policies, as well as tags in general, do not cost anything. Something to keep in mind. There is no cost associated. However number of tags you have on your resources, there is no cost. As well as the organizations to creating any kind of tag policies. So what I'm going to demo next is the concept of tag policies. The tag policies were introduced, especially the enforcement part was introduced in the last reInvent, a very powerful tool. So this is one of the key asks from my customers. Hey, I have a lot of business units. How do I ensure that my all the teams are fulfilling or meeting my same standard for tags across all the resources? So that is their main ask. So in order to do that, we can go first to the organizations. Organizations is a service to organize your accounts and to visualize all your accounts in a single pane of glass across all your regions. Very useful. And again, as I mentioned, there is no cost for using this service. Uh, so first, what we need to do is here is my account. If you see on the right hand side, you have a set of policies. You have service control policies and tag policies, and then you have AI services policy as well as backup policies. So for this demo, we are focused on the tag policies. So if you click on it, there is no policy created at this point. So let me show you how to create a policy. So here you can go to the tag policy. The tag policy is enabled, and the other two are disabled at this point. So let me give a name. So I'm naming the policy as tagging policy live and give a description. And next, here are the key criteria for my policy. So first is the tag key, which I'm interested in. So in this case, I'm interested in the tag key environment. The second point is about the capitalization compliance. As we mentioned a few times, tags are case sensitive. So if I want this tag policy to look for compliance to my capitalization, I can select this option. I'm going to select this option. By default, it is not. So if I have a lowercase tag and an uppercase one, it will be considered the same. But if you have this options enabled, it is going to have a strict capitalization criteria. Then the second one is, what are the supported values for this tag key? So here I can specify the allowed keys. So the first value is production, second is QA, and next is dev. And this option tells me if I'm allowing any kind of resources created with this non-compliant operations. So say I'm going to prevent any kind of resources being created which do not comply to this policy. And here I can specify what resources I'm interested in applying this policy on. So for this demo, I'm going to pick EC2. So in EC2, it shows all the different options available to me. I'm going to focus on EC2 instances. I'm going to create the policy. Let's see the details. So here is the name, and then the description and the corresponding ID and the ARN. Here is the JSON version of this policy. It is showing the tag key, which is the environment, and the tag values, which are what we specified: production, QA, and dev. And then the last section shows what is this policy enforced on. It is enforced on all EC2 instances. So that's what we wanted to create. Once the policy is created, I am going to attach this policy to my account. It is attached now. Now I'll go to my EC2 console. This is my EC2 main console page. Let me show creating an instance from the console. Let me pick up the first AMI available. I'm going to take the default options here and adding the tags here. Let me add a tag environment. And I'm going to give the value as production with a capital P. And I'm going to launch it. I'm going to allow my key. And I'm going to launch. So what you see, the launch fails. The tag policy does not allow the specified value for the following tag key environment. So it did not allow because the tag value what I assigned production with a capital P did not meet the criteria what I have specified in the tag policy, which is what I want. Now go back, and then I'm going to edit the tag.
And there's that auto filter, that prompt I was mentioning earlier to help you.
Yes. All right. So this time the launch is successful. So couple of things to keep in mind when we create these tag policies. The tag policies have to be done from the master account. And then you can apply these policies to any of these organizational units. If I apply this policy to an organizational unit, all the accounts beneath that organization unit will also inherit that same policy. If I apply this policy to the master account, which is the root account, all the accounts in that entire organization will inherit. Since it is a very powerful criteria policy, and also it could impact others from creating these resources or not. So before you attach these policies, make sure that you test it. It is very important that you test it with some test account and verify that your policy is works fine before you going ahead with deploying it across your organization. So that completes this policy. So now let me go back to the previous one I want to show quickly.
Hey, thank you, EP, for the demo. I'm just looking. I think we are right at about time. So I want to make sure that we have answered all the questions that we have on the chat window as well. That was a wonderful demo. Thank you so much. So everyone online, we looked at the tagging the AWS resources, and we looked at demo for using a couple of tools in demo today. So we looked at how you can use tagging to organize your AWS bill to reflect a cost structure that's meaningful to your business decisions, and so you can make some of those informed business decisions. If there are any questions today that were not answered, then please post your questions on forums.aws.amazon.com. You can also email us any feedback or questions at kc-live@amazon.com, and you'll see that email address posted on this window here. Thank you for joining us at Knowledge Center Live, and happy cloud computing.